Most people think surrogacy costs around $100,000. They're wrong. By the time you're actually holding your baby, you could be looking at closer to $150,000, maybe even $200,000. And nobody tells you this up front. Today I'm breaking down 9 hidden costs that agencies conveniently forget to mention during those first consultations. Some of these can hit you with bills of $10,000, $20,000, even $30,000 when you least expect it. And if you don't know about them now, you're going to be in for a really unpleasant surprise later. So if you're considering surrogacy, or you're already in the process, you need to hear this. Because one of these costs alone added over $25,000 to my friend's budget, and they had no idea it was coming. Let me start by saying this. I'm not here to scare you away from surrogacy. For many people, it's the only way to have a biological child. But what I am here to do is give you the real numbers, the actual costs, not the pretty starting price that agencies show you on their websites. Because here's the thing, when you first contact a surrogacy agency, they'll give you a quote. Maybe it's $80,000, maybe it's $120,000. And you think, okay, that's a lot of money, but we can make it work. We'll take out a loan, we'll use our savings, we'll figure it out. But that number they gave you? That's just the beginning. That's the base price under perfect conditions. And let me tell you something about surrogacy. It almost never goes perfectly. So let's get into it. Here are the 9 hidden costs that could completely blow up your surrogacy budget. Hidden cost. Number 1, multiple embryo transfer attempts. When agencies give you that initial quote, they usually assume the embryo transfer will work on the first try. They budget for 1 transfer, and that's it. But the reality is way different. The success rate for embryo transfers varies a lot depending on factors like the age of the egg donor, the quality of the embryos, and the surrogate's health. On average, each embryo transfer has about a 40 to 60% chance of resulting in pregnancy, which means there's a 40 to 60% chance it won't work. And here's where it gets expensive. Each failed transfer means you need to try again, and each attempt costs money. We're talking about another $10,000 to $15,000 per transfer attempt. This includes the medical procedures, medications for the surrogate, monitoring appointments, and coordination fees. I know a couple who went through 4 transfers before one finally took. 4. That's 3 extra attempts they didn't budget for. At $12,000 each, that's an extra $36,000 right there. And it's not just the transfer itself. Between each attempt, there's usually a waiting period. Your surrogate needs time to recover. You might need to create more embryos. All of this takes time and money. The medications alone for preparing the surrogate's body for transfer can run $2,000 to $3,000 each cycle. Most agencies will tell you about the possibility of multiple transfers, but they don't really emphasize how common it is. They definitely don't show you what your total costs could look like after 3 or 4 attempts. They show you the best case scenario and hope you don't ask too many questions about what happens if things don't go smoothly. Hidden cost number 2. Surrogate complications and bed rest. This is a big one. And it's something that can happen to anyone, regardless of how healthy your surrogate is at the start. Your surrogacy contract will include something called a base compensation for your surrogate. This is the amount she gets paid for carrying your baby. It might be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 depending on where you live and whether this is her first surrogacy or if she's experienced. But here's what they don't emphasize. If your surrogate has complications during pregnancy, that number can go way up. Let's say your surrogate develops gestational diabetes, or preeclampsia, or she needs to be put on bed rest for several weeks or months. Your contract will have clauses that require additional compensation for these situations. And we're not talking about small amounts. Bed rest compensation can run anywhere from $200 to $500 per week. If your surrogate is on bed rest for 3 months, that's an extra $5,000 to $6,000 at minimum. And that's just for bed rest. If she develops a condition that requires additional medical monitoring or treatment, you're responsible for those costs too. Extra doctor appointments, specialist visits, additional ultrasounds, monitoring equipment, all of it adds up. And here's something most people don't think about. If your surrogate is on bed rest, she might not be able to work her regular job. Many contracts include lost wages compensation, so you're not just paying her the bed rest fee, you might also be covering her lost income from missing work. Depending on her salary, this could be hundreds or even thousands of dollars per week on top of everything else. I've heard of cases where complications added $20,000 to $30,000 to the total cost, and there's no way to predict if this will happen. Your surrogate could be perfectly healthy with a great medical history and still develop complications. Pregnancy is unpredictable. Hidden cost number 3, insurance gaps and exclusions. Insurance is probably the most confusing and frustrating part of the surrogacy process, and it's where a lot of hidden costs live. Here's how it's supposed to work. Your surrogate should have health insurance that covers pregnancy. The agency will check this during the screening process. They'll tell you her insurance is good, everything's covered, no problem. But insurance companies are tricky. Many policies have surrogacy exclusions buried in the fine print. This means that even though the policy covers pregnancy in general, it specifically excludes pregnancies where the woman is acting as a surrogate for someone else. If you don't catch this before the pregnancy begins, you're in trouble. Because once the insurance company denies coverage, you're responsible for all the medical costs. And pregnancy medical costs are not cheap. A normal, uncomplicated pregnancy and delivery can cost $20,000 to $30,000 without insurance. If there are any complications, if the baby needs NICU care, if your surrogate needs a C-section or has any issues, you could be looking at $50,000, $75,000, even $100,000 or more in medical bills. Even if your surrogate's insurance doesn't have a surrogacy exclusion, there are still gaps. Deductibles, co-pays, out-of-pocket maximums. Most contracts specify that you're responsible for these costs. If her insurance has a $5,000 deductible and a $10,000 out-of-pocket maximum, that's $15,000 you need to pay. And then there's the question of what happens if the insurance company finds out about the surrogacy and drops her coverage mid-pregnancy. This does happen. It's rare, but it happens. If this occurs, you need to get a new insurance policy immediately, which is expensive and complicated when someone is already pregnant. Some intended parents choose to get a separate surrogacy insurance policy to protect against these scenarios. These policies are specifically designed to cover surrogacy-related medical costs if the surrogate's insurance falls through. But guess what? These policies aren't cheap. They can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $35,000, depending on the coverage level and the state you're in. Hidden cost number 4. Legal fees beyond the basics. Every surrogacy involves legal fees. You know this going in. You need a contract drafted. You need a lawyer to represent you, and a separate lawyer to represent your surrogate. The agency probably told you to budget around $7,000 to $10,000 for legal fees. But that's just for a straightforward case. If anything gets complicated, those legal fees can double or triple. What makes things complicated? A lot of things. If you're in a state with unclear surrogacy laws, you might need extra legal work to establish parental rights. If you're an international couple or same-sex couple, there might be additional legal requirements depending on your state or country. If there are any disputes during the pregnancy, even minor ones, you need legal counsel. If your surrogate decides she wants to change something in the contract mid-pregnancy, that requires legal negotiation. If there are any issues with the birth certificate or parental rights paperwork, that's more legal work. Each time your lawyer needs to draft a new document, have a phone call, send emails back and forth, file paperwork with the court, you're paying. Most lawyers charge $250 to $500 per hour. And here's something people don't realize. Even after the baby is born, there are legal steps. You need to establish legal parentage through the courts. This process is called a pre-birth or post-birth order depending on your state. It involves filing petitions, possibly appearing in court, and getting a judge to issue an order declaring you as the legal parents. In some states, this is simple and included in that initial legal fee estimate. In other states, it's complicated and expensive. If you're in a state that doesn't recognize pre-birth orders, you might need to do an adoption after the baby is born, even though it's biologically your child. Adoption processes involve home studies, background checks, additional legal filings, and can add another $5,000 to $10,000 to your costs. Hidden cost number 5. Egg donor and sperm donor costs. If you're using your own eggs and sperm, you can skip this section. But for many people going through surrogacy, they also need an egg donor, a sperm donor, or both. The agencies will tell you about donor costs up front. An egg donor might cost $15,000 to $30,000. Sperm from a sperm bank might cost $1,000 to $2,000 per vial, and you usually need multiple vials. But there are hidden costs within these costs. With egg donors, the quoted price usually includes her compensation, her medical screening, and the retrieval procedure, but it might not include everything. If your donor needs to travel to your fertility clinic, you're paying for her travel, hotel, and meals. If she needs to take time off work, you might be covering lost wages. If the first egg retrieval doesn't produce enough viable eggs, you might need to do a second cycle. That's another $15,000 to $30,000. Some people choose to do 2 retrievals back to back just to make sure they have enough embryos, which doubles the cost. And then there's genetic testing. If you want to do PGT testing on the embryos to screen for genetic conditions or to determine gender, that's an additional $3,000 to $5,000. Sperm donors seem cheaper at first, but the costs add up. You need multiple vials because not every IVF attempt works. If you're buying 3 or 4 vials at $1,000 each, that's $4,000 right there. Some people choose to buy more vials up front to ensure they have enough if they want more children in the future, which increases the immediate cost. If you're using a known donor instead of an anonymous donor from a sperm bank, there are different costs. Known donors need legal agreements drafted, medical screening, and genetic testing. All of this costs money that you might not have budgeted for. Hidden cost number 6, surrogate maternity clothing and monthly allowances. This might seem small compared to some of the other costs I've mentioned, but it adds up more than you'd think. Most surrogacy contracts include a monthly allowance for your surrogate. This is separate from her base compensation. It's money for pregnancy-related expenses like maternity clothes, extra food, vitamins, parking at doctor appointments, gas for traveling to appointments, and other miscellaneous costs. This allowance is usually somewhere between $200 and $500 per month. Over 9 months of pregnancy, that's $1,800 to $4,500. Then there's a separate maternity clothing allowance. Your surrogate needs new clothes as her body changes during pregnancy. Most contracts include a one-time payment of $500 to $1,000 for maternity clothes. There are also meal allowances for appointment days. If your surrogate has a doctor appointment that takes several hours, the contract might specify that you pay for her meals that day. If she's having weekly appointments in the 3rd trimester, that's 4 meals per month at $20 to $30 each. Some contracts include housekeeping allowances if the surrogate is on bed rest or having a difficult pregnancy. If she can't clean her house or do heavy chores, you might be paying for a cleaning service. That's another $100 to $200 per week. None of these individual costs are huge, but when you add them all together over the course of the pregnancy, you're looking at another $5,000 to $8,000 that might not have been clearly broken down in your initial quote. Hidden cost number 7, travel and accommodation for medical appointments. Unless you happen to live in the same city as your surrogate and your fertility clinic, you're going to be traveling a lot. There are key appointments where you'll want to be present: the embryo transfer, major ultrasounds, the birth. These are important moments, and most intended parents want to be there. But every trip costs money: flights, hotels, rental cars, meals. If you're traveling from another state or another country, these costs add up incredibly fast. Let's say you take 3 trips during the pregnancy: 1 for the transfer, 1 for the anatomy scan, and 1 for the birth. If you're flying domestically, that might be $500 to $1,000 per person per trip for flights. If there are 2 of you, that's $2,000 to $6,000 just for flights. Hotels can run $100 to $300 per night depending on the city. If you stay for 3 nights each trip, that's $300 to $900 per trip. Across 3 trips, that's another $900 to $2,700. Rental cars, meals, parking, ride shares, all of it adds up. For 3 trips, you could easily spend another $500 to $1,000 on these miscellaneous costs. So we're looking at roughly $4,000 to $10,000 just for travel related to key appointments. And that's if everything goes smoothly and you only need to make 3 trips. But what if the birth happens early and you need to book a last-minute flight? Last-minute flights are expensive. What if you need to stay longer than expected because the baby is in the NICU? Extended hotel stays can cost thousands of dollars. Some intended parents choose to travel to the surrogate city and stay there for the last month of pregnancy, just to make sure they're there when the baby arrives. If you're staying in a hotel or rental for a month, you're looking at $3,000 to $6,000 just for accommodation, plus food and other living expenses. Hidden cost number 8, newborn care and medical costs. You've made it through the pregnancy. Your baby is here. Congratulations. But the costs aren't over yet. Depending on your situation, there might be immediate medical costs for your baby that you didn't anticipate. If the baby needs any NICU time, even just for observation, that's expensive. NICU costs can range from $2,000 to $10,000 per day, depending on the level of care needed. Your baby needs to be added to your health insurance immediately, but there might be a gap between birth and when your insurance coverage kicks in. Those first few days or weeks might not be covered, which means you're paying out of pocket for any medical care. If you traveled to another state for the birth, you might need to stay there for a period of time before you can travel home with your baby. Some states require you to wait for birth certificate paperwork or court orders before the baby can leave the state. If you're staying in a hotel with a newborn for 1 to 3 weeks, you're looking at significant accommodation costs, plus the cost of all the baby supplies you need during that time. There's also the cost of setting up everything for the baby at home: crib, car seat, stroller, clothes, diapers, formula if you're not breastfeeding. While these aren't technically surrogacy costs, they're costs you need to factor in because they all happen at the same time. And when you've just spent $150,000 on surrogacy, finding another $3,000 to $5,000 for baby supplies can be stressful. Hidden cost number 9, agency fees for additional services. Most surrogacy agencies charge a base fee. This covers matching you with a surrogate, coordinating the process, and providing support throughout. This fee is usually $20,000 to $30,000 and is included in that initial quote you received. But there are additional services that agencies offer that cost extra. Case management fees if you need extra support or coordination. Rush fees if you want to expedite the matching process. Rematch fees if something goes wrong with your first surrogate match and you need to be matched with someone new. That last one is important. If your surrogate drops out of the process for any reason, whether it's medical, personal, or just a change of heart, you need to be matched with a new surrogate. Some agencies include one rematch in their fee, others charge you again. A rematch fee can be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000. There are also fees for additional administrative work. If you need extra legal document coordination, extra insurance verification, or additional background checks, the agency might charge you for these services. And here's something that really frustrates people. Some agencies charge a success fee. This is a fee you pay when the baby is born. It might be $5,000, $10,000, or even $15,000. Some agencies include this in the initial quote, but others add it as a separate line item that you don't see until you're deep into the process. So let's add this all up. We talked about 9 hidden costs. Let's say you experience half of them at moderate levels. 2 extra embryo transfer attempts. That's $24,000. Some surrogate bed rest for 6 weeks. That's another $3,000. Insurance gaps covering deductibles and co-pays. That's $10,000. Additional legal fees for complications. That's $5,000. Travel for 3 trips. That's $6,000. Monthly allowances and maternity costs. That's $6,000. NICU time for a few days. That's $8,000. That's $62,000 in hidden costs right there. And these aren't worst-case scenarios. These are fairly common situations that many intended parents face. Now you understand why I said at the beginning that surrogacy often costs way more than that initial quote. It's not that agencies are lying to you exactly, it's that they're giving you the best-case scenario and hoping you don't dig deeper into all the what-ifs. So what can you do about this? How do you protect yourself from getting blindsided by these costs? First, ask detailed questions during your agency consultation. Don't just ask what the total cost is. Ask them to break down every single component. Ask what happens if the transfer doesn't work. Ask what happens if the surrogate has complications. Ask about insurance verification processes. Ask about all the scenarios I just described. Second, add a buffer to your budget. If the agency quotes you $100,000, plan for $130,000 or $140,000. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's better to have money left over than to run out halfway through. Third, read your surrogate contract very carefully before you sign it. Make sure you understand every clause about additional compensation and what triggers it. If there's anything you don't understand, ask your lawyer to explain it. Fourth, get good insurance advice. Talk to an insurance specialist who understands surrogacy. They can review your surrogate's policy and tell you if there are any red flags or exclusions you need to worry about. Some agencies have insurance coordinators on staff, but you might want to get a second opinion from an independent specialist. Fifth, plan for the worst-case scenario financially. I know this sounds pessimistic, but it's smart. What if you need 4 embryo transfers instead of 1? What if your surrogate has serious complications? What if the baby needs extended NICU care? If you know you can handle these scenarios financially, you'll feel much less stressed during the process. Surrogacy is expensive. There's no way around that. But going into it with your eyes open about the real cost makes a huge difference. You won't feel blindsided when unexpected bills show up. You won't feel resentful toward your agency or surrogate. You'll just be prepared. And look, even with all these hidden costs, surrogacy is worth it for so many people. I'm not trying to scare you away. I'm trying to make sure you go into this journey informed and prepared. Because the last thing you want when you're trying to bring a baby into the world is financial stress on top of all the emotional stress that already comes with surrogacy. So take these 9 hidden costs seriously. Factor them into your planning. Ask the hard questions. And make sure your budget has room for the unexpected. If this helped you, go watch my next video where I break down how to choose the right surrogacy agency.